It started on a Sunday afternoon, the kind where nothing feels urgent. I was seated at the dining table, a sunbeam cutting across the pile of papers in front of me, old receipts, utility bills, and a couple of envelopes still sealed from months ago. Julia had taken the kids out to the park so I could focus, but really I was just putting off doing our taxes. I hadn't used the old Samsung tablet in over a year, but I remembered it had some PDF converters that made this tedious task slightly less painful. After a few minutes of booting up and enduring the lag, I pulled up the email app to forward myself some documents from an old thread. That's when I saw it. Subject: A Night to Remember. From unknown sender. Attachment: one image. I almost deleted it without opening. I assumed it was spam. But something about it, maybe the phrasing, maybe the fact it had slid past the junk filter, made me tap. The image loaded slowly, the Wi-Fi crawling as if it knew what was coming. First came the background. Soft lighting, floor-to-ceiling windows with the San Diego skyline shining through. A familiar scene. We'd had dinner at that exact restaurant once for our anniversary, years ago. Julia had called it magic. Then the figures came into view. My heart stalled. There she was, Julia, my wife, smiling wide in a way that didn't belong to me anymore. Her hair curled just the way she liked it, lips painted in the Berg asterisk and Y shade she reserved for special occasions. And that dress, it was cobalt blue, tight, and cut low. I'd never seen it before. Not once. She was leaning close to a man in a charcoal suit, salt and pepper hair and a Rolex peeking from under his cuff. His arm was draped around her waist like it had been there all night. My thumb hovered over the screen, hesitant to zoom in. My stomach twisted and I had to place the tablet down to stop my hands from shaking. She had told me she was attending a school fundraising dinner that night. Something with the parent board, a casual gathering, just some colleagues from PTA, she had said. I remembered how she looked rushing down the stairs, heels clicking across the floor, mumbling that she might be late because they were discussing budget plans for the spring fair. I remembered it clearly because she kissed my cheek on her way out. Quick, distracted. That night, she came home around 11:30 p.m. I had been half asleep on the couch, the TV still playing. She slipped off her heels at the door, tossed her purse down, and claimed it had run long because the new chairperson was obsessed with turning it into a gala. She made a joke about parents being worse than their kids when it came to fundraising. I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to. But now, sitting alone at the table, staring at that image, I felt something unravel inside me. Like a thread pulled from the hem of something I trusted to stay stitched together. When she returned from the park with the kids later that day, I waited until they were occupied in the backyard, chasing each other with bubbles and chalk-stained hands. I approached her in the kitchen, calm on the outside, but my insides buzzed with the kind of energy you get when something's about to change forever. Hey, I started, trying to keep my voice neutral. Got a weird email earlier. Someone sent me a photo of you. She turned, wiping her hands on a towel. What kind of photo? I showed her. She didn't panic. Didn't gasp. Didn't accuse me of anything. Instead, she leaned in, studied it for a moment, and nodded like she'd just remembered a song lyric. Oh, that was from that dinner I mentioned, she said smoothly. That guy's name is Greg, I think. He's new on the PTA committee, works in finance or something. We ended up sitting next to each other when the seating changed last minute. One of the sponsors had booked the restaurant for us. They wanted to impress some school board members. I didn't speak. I just watched her. She met my eyes. Held them. I know the picture looks strange, she added, voice even, but nothing weird happened. He was being overly friendly. You know how people are when they've had a drink. I should have moved his hand, honestly. It was the kind of explanation that would hold up in most marriages. Detailed. Rational. Calm. Too calm. She didn't stumble. Didn't search for words. It was all packaged, prepped like she'd practiced it in the mirror just in case. I nodded, pretending to accept it. Right, I said. Makes sense. But it didn't. Not to me. I carried the tablet to the garage later that night and locked it in a drawer. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I wasn't ready for what it might mean if I looked at that photo again. I laid in bed next to her, both of us facing away the way we'd quietly gotten used to. I stared at the ceiling for hours, my chest tight, listening to her slow, measured breathing. She fell asleep easily. I didn't sleep at all. Because the woman in that picture looked like someone I didn't know. And worse, like someone who didn't miss me. After that night, I started looking backward. Not obsessively at first, but like a man rewinding a movie he suddenly realized he never really understood. I kept asking myself, was this always here? Were the signs always there? Hiding in plain sight? And the more I thought about it, the more pieces started to stick out like puzzle fragments forced into the wrong place. Take the running. Julia had never been into exercise. We both used to laugh about it, how she couldn't jog more than a block without complaining. Then, about 4 months ago, she suddenly got serious about her health, bought a pair of expensive trainers, downloaded an app, and started heading out around 7 p.m. most nights. Always at sunset, always just before bedtime routines started. At first, I was proud of her, cheered her on, even offered to join once or twice. She declined, said it was her time to think. I didn't push. I wanted to believe in her intentions. But one night, she came home late, around 9:30, said she'd run into an old friend and they ended up grabbing a smoothie. The thing is, she smelled different. Not like sweat or body spray, but like someone else's cologne. Expensive, woodsy, masculine. When I asked, half joking, she laughed it off. Some guy on the bus must have spilled his entire bottle on me, she said, waving her hand like it was nothing. Public transport roulette. I believed it then, or at least I pretended to. There was another time she stayed out overnight. Said her car broke down during a sudden rainstorm and she crashed at her coworker Layla's place across town. She FaceTimed me from Layla's living room, but the camera never panned. The curtains behind her were floral. Layla's place, I knew, had bare brick walls. I'd been there twice for brunches. I told myself she might have moved. The next morning, she brought back coffee and croissants. Apologized for the scare. Claimed her phone had died. Hugged me a little longer than usual. I chalked it up to a stressful night. Another piece that never fit. A small, velvet credit card sleeve I found under the passenger seat of her car while vacuuming it one weekend. It was black with a gold trim, elegant and empty. No card inside. Not one from our shared accounts. When I asked, she said it was for a corporate card from a project she was consulting on. Said she hadn't activated it yet. It was a good answer. Almost too good. But it stayed with me the way her tone shifted when I asked. Like she'd suddenly stepped into character. It was subtle but unmistakable. The voice she used when she was bluffing during board games. Light, precise, performed. Then came the phone. Or rather, the new phone rules. We used to share everything. We'd grab each other's phones when one was charging, answer calls without thinking. But now, hers had a passcode I didn't know. She claimed it was a work policy. Said her company had updated its security protocols and they couldn't allow family members access anymore. But it wasn't just the passcode. She started keeping it face down, then silent, then completely off during dinner. And if I reached for it just to move it, she'd glance over like a hawk. Every time. The final shift, though, didn't come from me. Came from our son. He was 10, perceptive in that quiet, serious way some kids are. One evening, while Julia was out for a run, I was helping him with a geography project. Out of nowhere, he looked up and said, "Dad, do you think Mom's mad at us?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "She's always on her phone when she's home," he said. "And she never wants to eat with us anymore. She doesn't laugh at my jokes. I dunno. It's like, she's here, but not really." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and told him she was probably stressed with work. But the truth was I'd felt the same way, like she was slipping out of focus. The only person who didn't seem to notice was our daughter. She was 6 and still drew family portraits with big smiles and stick figure hearts above our heads. Her world was still whole, still warm. She made cards for Julia almost every week. "World's best mom," scribbled in glitter and crayon. Julia would thank her, smile, then set them aside. She never taped them to the fridge anymore. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat on the couch alone and tried to organize the pieces. Not the evidence exactly, just the feeling, the pattern, the disconnect. Julia came home around 9:45, hair damp and shoes muddy. She dropped her keys in the bowl, muttered something about being tired, and headed straight upstairs. I followed 10 minutes later. In bed, I lay still while she scrolled through her phone under the covers. She turned the screen away when I shifted. I asked casually who she was texting. "Just Layla," she said. "She's planning a baby shower." Drama with the cake. She didn't look up, and I didn't press. I just stared at the ceiling fan and wondered how many lies a marriage could swallow before it stopped feeling like a marriage. It was a Thursday when the call came through, short, impersonal, and from a blocked number. The work conference I was scheduled to attend in Los Angeles had been canceled. Budget issues, apparently. They offered a virtual makeup session the following week, but in person? Done. I was already packed, flight booked. Julia thought I'd be gone through Saturday evening. So I didn't tell her I was coming back early. I booked the first flight home and didn't text, didn't call. Not because I had a plan. I didn't. But something inside me, it wasn't suspicion exactly. It was instinct. That same tightening I felt when I saw the photo on the tablet. The same sense that something wasn't adding up. The flight was quiet. I spent most of it staring out the window, watching the clouds thin over the desert. I rehearsed reasons in my head for coming back early, excuses in case I was wrong. In case everything was fine. I arrived back in town around 3:30 p.m. and took a cab straight to the house. Our street looked exactly the same, kids playing soccer near the mailbox, an elderly couple walking their schnauzer. It was normal. Comforting. The kind of neighborhood where nothing exciting ever happened. When I opened the front door, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The second thing was the smell. Not bad. Just unfamiliar. Like sandalwood and something citrusy. Not Julia's perfume and definitely not mine. It lingered in the air, clinging to the furniture like a memory. I set my bag down quietly, every movement deliberate. The house didn't feel right. I couldn't explain it, but it was like stepping into a room seconds after someone had left. The energy still clung to the walls. I walked through the living room. The couch cushions were sunken in the middle. A blanket was folded over the armrest, not one we usually used. It was pale gray. I couldn't remember owning it. The bedroom was untouched, bed still made, pillows stiff. It gave me a brief flicker of hope. Maybe she'd gone to her mother's. Maybe she'd taken the kids to a late movie or to grab dinner after school. But I couldn't shake that smell. Then I checked the bathroom. 2 wine glasses sat on the counter. One still had a trace of lipstick, a color I didn't recognize. Darker than the soft pink Julia typically wore. Between the sinks was a small plate with melted chocolate, half a strawberry stem left behind. In the trash bin under the sink, I found the real confirmation. An empty wine bottle. A used tissue. And a crumpled foil wrapper, gold, from a brand of condoms we had never used. Luxury. Imported. The kind people didn't keep on hand unless they planned to use them. My throat went dry. I stood there for a long time just staring. It wasn't anger that hit me first, it was detachment. Like I was watching a version of my life from behind glass. Like the world had tilted and I hadn't caught up. I heard the front door open at exactly 5:14 p.m. Her voice floated in, light and casual. "Babe, I grabbed sushi from that place you like." And she paused. I didn't move. I just waited. Her footsteps grew slower, more careful as she rounded the corner. Then she saw me. I was standing in the bathroom doorway holding the wine glass. Her face froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. That second where every muscle in her body registered surprise, then recalibrated. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She set the grocery bag on the floor. "You're home early," she said, voice tight. "I noticed," I replied. I set the glass down gently on the counter. "Someone else was too." She blinked. There was a beat of silence. Then she let out a long, measured breath. "Brandon," she said, as if she were talking to a patient. "Let me explain." But I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. Not while the scent of him still lingered in the air. Not with the image of that wrapper burned into my mind. I walked past her, picked up my overnight bag, and headed for the door. She didn't try to stop me. Didn't call after me. Just stood there, unmoving. That night, I checked into a motel about 25 miles away. Not because I wanted distance, but because I needed time to think. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the TV on low, staring at the ceiling fan spin until the blur of the blades matched the fog in my head. At 7:02 a.m. the next morning, my phone buzzed. A long message from Julia. I didn't read it. Then another, longer one. And another. I finally opened the fourth one out of sheer impulse. She confessed. She said it had started nearly 6 months ago. She hadn't meant to. They met at a charity event. He was a business partner of someone on the school board. They hit it off. He understood her, she wrote. He listened when she felt invisible at home. It was supposed to be brief, she said. But it became real. Real. That word stuck with me. Because if it was real, then everything we had built, our house, our family, our 10 years, what was that? Pretend? I didn't respond. The messages kept coming all day. Some apologetic. Some defensive. Some just sat. By nightfall, I had turned off notifications. I wasn't ready to speak. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because I didn't trust the version of myself that would come out in the moment. Instead, I wrote a single sentence in the motel notepad. You made a choice. Now I'm making mine. I folded it into my wallet and closed my eyes. For the first time in days, I slept. The motel I checked into wasn't anything special. Peeling wallpaper, a squeaky ceiling fan, a TV that showed nothing but local news and crime dramas. But it had one thing I needed more than anything else: anonymity. Nobody knew me there. I didn't leave the room for the first day, barely moved except to reposition the curtains. I stared at the brown carpet until the pattern looked like waves. The bag I'd packed for the conference sat on the bed, still zipped, mocking the life I had left behind. My phone buzzed every hour or so. Julia's name, sometimes just a number, maybe her friends, maybe her mother. I didn't check. I didn't care. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I thought betrayal would come with a storm, that I'd be throwing things, yelling, pacing like in the movies. But all I felt was numb. Like someone had pulled the color out of my world and left it in grayscale. The room was cold, but I didn't adjust the thermostat. I didn't eat that first night. Or the second. On the third morning, I finally forced myself to the vending machine in the hallway and bought a protein bar and a bottle of water. The walk back felt like a marathon. My legs were heavy, like they belonged to someone else. Julia's texts came in waves. The first few were long. Panicked. Emotional. Apologies stacked on apologies. I didn't mean for this to happen. I felt so alone. You were always working, always distracted. Then the tone shifted. You have to understand, I still love you. We can fix this. Please, let me explain. In person. Eventually, they turned into silence. I guess she realized I wasn't reading them. Or maybe she ran out of things to say. I stared at the screen sometimes, at the little preview line of each message. But I didn't open them. I didn't need to. She'd already said everything I needed to hear. Instead, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Our kids at the beach last summer, our son holding a crab in one hand, trying to look brave while our daughter squealed behind him. A video of them decorating cookies, frosting everywhere. Julia in the background laughing. Her voice sounded different back then. Lighter. Honest. By the third night, something shifted in me. I wasn't sure if it was strength or exhaustion. Maybe both. I sat at the little desk in the corner of the motel room and wrote out a list on the back of a diner receipt. Call work. Find a lawyer. Talk to mom, ask if she can take the kids for a while. Look into new living arrangements. I didn't even know why I wrote it. Maybe it was just to remind myself I still had a life beyond the room. Beyond Julia. Beyond this rupture I hadn't seen coming. I didn't want revenge. That wasn't what this was about. I just wanted clarity. A way forward that didn't involve pretending. That night, I dreamed I was back at the house, but everything was silent. Like I was underwater. The furniture was all covered in white sheets, and no matter how loud I tried to speak, no one turned to hear me. Julia was in the kitchen, cooking, humming, but she wasn't really there. I woke up with the sheets twisted around my legs and the taste of salt in my mouth. I didn't cry. Still haven't. Maybe that's coming. Or maybe part of me already cried enough in the quiet moments of the past 6 months when something always felt just slightly off. On the fourth morning, I called in to work. Left a voicemail for my supervisor, family emergency. Need some time. We'll check in later. My voice didn't sound like mine. Then I called my mom. She picked up on the third ring. Brandon? There was something in her voice, concern, maybe, but not surprise. Yeah, I said. I need a favor. Anything, she replied without hesitation. I told her I needed her to keep the kids for a few more days. Just until I figured things out. She didn't ask questions, just told me to take care of myself. That she'd tell them I was on a work trip and missed them terribly. I'll make pancakes for dinner, she added. You know they love that. When I hung up, the silence felt different. Not peaceful, but purposeful. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside for the first time. Just walked the parking lot in slow circles, sipping burnt coffee from the lobby. A woman passed me with her toddler in tow. The little girl pointed at me and said something about sad man. Her mother shushed her and offered me a sympathetic smile. I nodded. Couldn't argue with the kid's observation. That night, I turned my phone back on fully. Not to call Julia. Not yet. But to reread one message. It was from my son. Sent 2 days ago. Hi Dad. I miss you. Mom said you're on a trip, but you didn't say bye. I hope you're okay. I told Lily you're getting us cool souvenirs. Please come home soon. I made a drawing for you. I'll save it. I sat with that message for a long time. He had no idea what was going on. And yet somehow I think he did. Kids are like that. They pick up on things adults try to hide. Tone, timing, tension in a room. I opened the message again and again. Not because I didn't know what it said, but because I needed to feel something anchor me. Something real. Eventually, I started writing back. Draft after draft. Never hit send. Because what do you tell a child when the world you built for them has a crack down the middle? 2 weeks passed before I saw her again. Not because I couldn't. I just didn't want to. We'd exchanged a few messages by then, dry, practical things. Arrangements for the kids. Clarifications about bills. No emotion, no warmth, no deeper conversation. And then there was the gala. It was a charity event she'd been planning for months. Some literacy initiative tied to the school board. The kind of thing she lived for. Organizing committees, shaking hands, dressing up. Julia could step into a room and make it orbit around her when she wanted to. Even after everything, her name was still listed in the promotional flyer. Keynote speaker, Julia Hilton, board advisor and event chair. I saw it online. I stared at her *T longer than I should have. Not because I missed her, but because I didn't recognize the woman in the photo anymore. I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway, not to make a scene. I had no interest in drama. This wasn't about revenge. It was about ending things the right way. The gala was held at a converted museum downtown. High ceilings, string lights, champagne trays drifting through the crowd. I wore a simple suit and moved like a ghost. Unfamiliar enough to slip past the ushers, confident enough that no one questioned me. I didn't need to find her right away. I knew where she'd be. Backstage, reviewing her notes, fixing her hair, preparing to walk out into applause. I found her purse instead. It sat unattended on a table near the backstage lounge, partially unzipped. I didn't linger. I slipped 2 things inside and walked away before my heart could change its mind. The first was our wedding ring, my ring. I hadn't worn it since the night I left, but I'd kept it in my wallet, flat against that folded notepad paper I'd scribbled on in the motel. It still bore a faint scratch from the day we moved into our first apartment, when we were too young to afford a real moving crew. The second was a note, handwritten. No anger, no accusations. Just this: you made your choice. I just made mine. I didn't wait for the speech. Didn't care to hear her voice echo through the speakers. Instead, I found a spot near the side exit, one eye on the stage. From that angle, I could see the podium and a sliver of backstage. The crowd hushed as the MC introduced her. Please welcome Julia Hilton. She walked out confidently, wearing navy blue, her hair pulled back. Calm, collected. For a moment, I saw the woman I married. Then I saw her pause. She had just reached the podium, her smile fixed in place, when she reached down to her bag for a note she'd written. Probably something rehearsed. But she found mine instead. Her posture changed instantly. She froze just slightly. Enough that someone who knew her well, *mately, could see it. The audience didn't notice. But I did. The way her hand lingered just a beat too long. The way her breathing shifted, shoulders pulling tight, mouth going dry. She unfolded the paper. She saw the ring. She didn't speak for 5 full seconds. Then she blinked hard, looked out over the audience, and cleared her throat. Good evening, she began, voice cracking just slightly. I'd like to begin by thanking the sponsors of tonight's event. Her words stumbled like dominoes. The rhythm was gone. She kept glancing back at the podium, at the bag just out of frame. Her notes lay untouched. Halfway through, she lost her place entirely and muttered, "Excuse me." She turned to someone behind the curtain and whispered something. The mic went dead. A confused silence swept the crowd. I slipped out the side door, unnoticed. Outside, the air was crisp. I stood there for a while, listening to the city move around me. Horns, laughter, someone's dog barking down the block. I didn't feel proud or powerful. There was no victory in it, but I felt clean, like I had drawn a final line. I walked 2 blocks before I realized I still had my wallet open in my hand. That folded notepad paper from the motel was still inside. I took it out, read the line again. Then crumpled it, tossed it into the nearest trash can. That part of me, the one that needed to explain everything, to justify, to hold on, he was gone. The next morning, I woke to a message from Julia. Just one. I got your note. I understand. I think I always did. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Later that afternoon, our son came home from my mom's place. He dropped his backpack by the door and launched himself at me with a hug that almost knocked the wind out of me. Missed you, he mumbled into my shirt. I missed you too, buddy. Our daughter followed, arms full of her usual drawings. She held one up to my face, 3 stick figures holding hands. The sun had a smile on it. 2 clouds hovered in the corner with pink hearts raining down. I was in the middle. I always was in her pictures. You smell like home again, she said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. And for the first time in weeks, I believed her. That night, I made mac and cheese from scratch, just like Julia used to. It didn't taste the same. It was a little overcooked and I forgot the breadcrumbs. But the kids ate every bite and asked for seconds. After they went to bed, I brewed 2 cups of coffee out of habit. One stayed untouched. I sat on the couch and stared at it for a while, then poured it out. 1 cup was enough now. Julia didn't come home after the gala. I didn't expect her to. She vanished for a few days, no calls, no messages. I heard from her sister that she'd taken time off work. She's processing, was all the text said. I didn't ask where she was. I didn't want to know. The house was still. Not just quiet, but still. The kind of silence that feels too deliberate, like it's holding its breath. I found myself walking through rooms just to hear the floor creak, just to feel less haunted. When she finally showed up again, it was around noon on a Tuesday. I was folding laundry. The knock on the door was soft. Hesitant. I opened it and found her there, looking like a ghost of herself, a hair unwashed, eyes puffy, body wrapped in the kind of coat she only wore when she didn't want to be seen. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just stood there for a moment until she finally whispered, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside but didn't answer. She walked through the house slowly, touching the backs of chairs, glancing at family photos. I watched her movements, delicate, tired, unsure. When she reached the kitchen, she turned to me. "I know I don't deserve to be here," she said, voice shaking. "But I needed to see them." "To see you." "They're at Mom's," I replied. "I didn't think today was the day." She nodded like she expected that. Then, more quietly, "You don't have to forgive me. I just want to be part of their lives." Somehow. I didn't respond. Not then. I watched her stand in our kitchen, surrounded by reminders of the life we built, and I felt tired. Not angry. Just worn down by all the weight. That evening, after she left, I picked the kids up. Our son didn't ask questions. He just hugged me, held on tight like he was anchoring himself. Our daughter, wide-eyed and dreamy, chattered away about a drawing she made. "This one's for Mommy too. You'll give it to her, right?" I nodded, but I didn't promise anything. That night, the 3 of us sat at the dinner table. I helped with homework, made up bedtime stories, brushed tangled hair. When I poured my coffee, I only made 1 cup. Again. 6 weeks later, Julia moved into a small loft across town. Not too far, but far enough. The divorce was quiet. No shouting. No courtroom dramatics. Just paperwork, signatures, the exchanging of house keys and custody calendars. We split the time evenly. Fairly. Neatly. Too neatly, maybe. Our son grew quieter. Not sullen, just internal. He stopped asking about Julia but hugged her hard when it was her weekend. Our daughter clung to the idea that this was just a pause. She kept drawing those same family pictures, always with a house in the background and all 4 of us holding hands. I never corrected her. Instead, I focused on what was in front of me. Mornings became a routine: breakfast, lunch boxes, school drop-offs. I started learning the small things: how to braid hair, how to tell when a 5th grader is faking a stomach ache, how to talk about feelings without trying to fix everything. I told them I was proud of them. Every day. Not because I was perfect, but because I knew they needed to hear it. Julia and I kept our interactions limited. Polite. Civil. At first, we were like coworkers. Then, eventually, like strangers who used to share something precious. She apologized again in her own way, a letter tucked into our daughter's backpack, one week. It said she didn't expect anything but hoped I was okay. I didn't reply. But I didn't throw it away either. Life didn't go back to what it was. It couldn't. But a different rhythm settled in. Slower. Simpler. And as the weeks turned into months, I stopped asking what could have been. Instead, I focused on what still was. 2 small hearts that still beat loud, still trusted me, still needed me whole. Our family had changed shape, but its heart stayed alive.